Welcome to the latest edition of the Hub of Champions podcast with your host, Shukri Wrights. It's a double screen night for those of you watching on YouTube. And if you're listening to the pod wherever you get your pod, you're quickly realizing, you probably heard it already, that there is a secondary voice on the pod. But it's no secondary voice, and you just heard him again laughing. It's no secondary voice. It's no ordinary voice, I should say. This individual and this man, I will honestly tell you that I had the chance of meeting him back in November at the convention, at the NECTA convention in Rhode Island, and it really was such a blast and a treat to meet in person. A good friend of mine, like someone who I really have grown to admire his work in sports media, especially in the sports betting landscape. And if you're in New England and you're watching or listening to this podcast, you are very familiar by him, especially if you watch NESN. So, without further ado, the sports betting extraordinaire, the radio host himself, Travis Thomas of NESN, and as well as WEEI. Travis, welcome to the Hub of Champions, my man.
Man, what an incredible intro, man. I feel like
Thank you.
I need you to do that everywhere I go, and we have a marching band with us.
I don't mind. Either that we can play a little Mary J. Blige, to set the mood. I knew you would like that. I knew you would like that. So but no, my pleasure, man. I'm excited to have you on the pod, man. Like I'm just like, as I told you before we recorded, there's so much I want to get to. There's so much I want to talk about, both sports and as well as outside of sports. And let's start like within sports itself, because right now in Boston, like there is so much going on. There's so much happening as pertains to the Patriots. The end of the Bill Belichick era, it came and it went almost a week ago now. It still feels very surreal, especially after the news yesterday that the Atlanta Falcons, of all teams, interviewed Bill Belichick. And I find that to be strange in itself, because imagine you, the bully, you go down to Atlanta and you pull a General Sherman and you go get interviewed for a job by an organization whom you will forever own. And yes, you will forever own because of that 28-3 historic comeback in Super Bowl 51. You go down there and say, you know what? I'm going to interview for the job. And if it's for me, it's going to be for me. No problem. But I just find it to be still jarring that Bill Belichick he's a single man who can talk to whomever he wants to do. He's a single man. He can flirt with whoever he wants to in the marketplace, and no one can say a thing to him about that. So, with that being said, I'll ask you, Travis, as Bill Belichick is exploring his options as a single coaching man, and a single man no less, unless last time we checked, does it still feel surreal to you that Bill Belichick is no longer the head coach and general manager of the New England Patriots?
It does feel surreal to me, but I would say all of us knew it was coming. I just think it was a tough pill to swallow once it finally happened. Seeing the press conference like we all did that day was, I thought, the right thing to do from both parties. Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick seemed like the official end of a dynasty, if you will, and it was a classy send-off. Now we understand Gerard Mayo gets the job. So we've moved on, but I think just seeing Bill's name attached to these other jobs is going to take some getting used to. And certainly once he picks a job and he's wearing those colors on the sideline in a cutoff hoodie, that's going to be tough to see as well. Listen, at the end of the day, I think Atlanta was obviously smart to bring him in, but you're probably going to have your pick between the Chargers, unless Harbaugh gets a gig. But Chargers is a great job. We'll see what happens with Dallas after that embarrassment. We'll see what happens with the Eagles after that embarrassment. If, let's, for the sake of this combo between you and I, say Mike McCarthy's retained, Sirianni's retained, and Harbaugh takes the Chargers job, I'll be honest with you. I think the Falcons really, we'll call it the second tier of jobs, I think that's a really good job. It's a talented team, at least offensively in terms of weapons, and we see with Bill, not the most offensive innovator you've ever seen. So he could come in there, get that defense tight. They'll have to figure something out at quarterback, obviously, because I don't think the guys they have in house are getting it done. And that is a division that, Bill could make an impact in right away. I think Atlanta's sort of that next tier of really good jobs. And I think Bill Belichick knows that.
I think he also recognizes that because he sees the division, and the division right now is only dominated by one team. And I'm using dominated very loosely here.
Right.
And that is by Tampa Bay, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I do believe that they took a gamble on Baker Mayfield and it paid off handsomely. And
Yep.
it did. And right now, there is not a single challenger in that division to challenge the Buccaneers. The Panthers are a disaster right now. And who knows what will happen with Bryce Young at quarterback. Will he ever attain any level of success in the NFL? That remains to be seen. The Saints, like they just fired their offensive coordinator of the last 15 seasons. That's a hot mess down in the Big Easy.
Yep.
And I just, as a division as a whole, I just don't have a whole lot of confidence, dare I say faith, in terms of anyone being able to challenge the Buccaneers. And the only person who could really make an impact, as you alluded to, is Bill Belichick. If he goes to Atlanta, do I think they will become an overnight success? No, because they do have some serious questions that they need to answer, especially quarterback. Do they believe that they have the guy? That's really the big question. And I think that Bill Belichick doesn't really know for sure. I mean, he may know based on like from watching teams and games from afar, but as far as intimately having full knowledge of the players that's on that 53-man roster, I don't think he really knows. So if he were to take the Atlanta job, I say like push come to shove, I do think that it doesn't add instant credibility, sure, but he still is walking into that situation with a lot of question marks. And if that team doesn't have a quarterback, or they don't think they have a quarterback, it's going to be very hard for Belichick to turn around and say yes, because he's not going to go to a situation where there isn't a quarterback that's there and that is ready to win.
Absolutely. Let's have this conversation because I
Sure.
completely agree with you.
Mhm.
Look, the goal is to win another Super Bowl, right? I
Yeah.
understand he wants to pass Shula, but Brady won a Super Bowl without Bill. So Bill, I'm sure, wants to win one without Brady. If the role is to do that and the goal is to do that, you have to look, and I'm going back to these jobs. You
Yeah.
have to look at the Chargers, you have to look at the Eagles if it opens up, and you have to look at the Cowboys if it opens up. It's those three. And I look, could he go to Atlanta and improve them? It sounds like you and I both feel the same way. So at best, yes, he improves the Atlanta Falcons. Maybe they win the NFC South. They host a playoff game. He may win that game. But you and I do not believe he's going to win a Super Bowl in Atlanta
No.
as it stands currently. And quarterbacks don't grow on trees. So if I'm Bill, I mean, listen, I'm holding out for one of those three. See what happens with Harbaugh. In my humble opinion, I still think the Chargers is the best job. I
It
think what
is.
happened, I think what happened in Philly, a lot of infighting. There could be some locker room issues there, kind of festering under the surface that a new coach may not want to deal with. And then in Dallas, we understand Jerry Jones and just a madhouse that is the Dallas Cowboys as a brand. So I
Yeah.
look at the Chargers, man. I see Justin Herbert. I see offensive weapons all over the place.
Austin
I
Eckler.
see Austin Eckler. I see paper champions on defense. A lot of talent in terms of the names on defense, but they haven't lived up to expectations. That feels like the perfect spot for Bill. They have a high draft pick. I just think the Chargers is the best gig. It's just a matter of is it going to be available to him or not.
I absolutely agree. And you were talking about like the defense, because you're talking about like offensive weapons and whatnot. But as you were saying that, my mind shifted to the Chargers defense.
Yeah.
Can you imagine Bill Belichick at the helm with the defensive pass rushers that he will have at his disposal, with the likes of Khalil Mack and as
Yep.
well as Joey Bosa
Yep.
as edge
Yep.
rushers. Can you imagine that? He hasn't had something like that since obviously when he was here in New England. And I'll even go as far as like the year the Patriots won their sixth and last Super Bowl in 2018. So that
Yep.
in itself has got to be really enticing to say, the Chargers defense is not that bad. There are playmakers there on that side of the ball. Question is, can I make a few tweaks that's going to take this defense to the next level? But the bigger question is secondary.
That's
Can
right.
he be able to get something out of that secondary to be able to complement the pass rush that the Chargers do have? And I do agree with you when you said that the Chargers truly, it really is the best job. I mean, come on. We haven't really seen Justin Herbert hit his stride just yet.
That's right.
But I will also say this. The reason why I will not be surprised if Jim Harbaugh, the head coach currently at Michigan, gets the job with the Chargers, it wouldn't surprise me, is because we have seen this time and time again with Jim Harbaugh. His track record speaks for itself. Look at the job that he did when he was in San Francisco with Alex Smith first in 2011,
Right.
and then the final 4 seasons that he was there, that he had Colin Kaepernick, obviously 2012 getting to the Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick, and then he goes to Michigan, and this past season he wins a national championship with JJ McCarthy, who's no world beater of a quarterback. He's maybe a second or third round on draft pick at best. So what does
Right.
that tell you? His ability to cultivate and get the best out of quarterbacks, there's a track record that is there. And I think that in itself is something that the Chargers are going to take very seriously because they know they have a franchise guy in Justin Herbert. That's not the question. Problem is the coaches that they've had, Brandon Staley, they have not been able to get the most out of Justin Herbert's talents, especially as he enters the prime of his career.
Yeah, and I don't know if Bill Belichick's really the guy to do that, right? I mean,
I
obviously,
agree.
you bring in a Belichick, the defense you would think is going to be upgraded. And I'll say this about the Chargers, Lord knows, because I bet on them and I lost all my money. I mean, they were losing close games. They were
Oh
in all
no.
of these games, bro.
Mhm.
They didn't get smoked like we just watched the Eagles against the Buccaneers. I mean, they were in tight games. In fact,
They got smoked against Vegas, so that's the only game now. That's
they did.
63 to that. Oh God.
They did, but most
Yeah.
of their games that they were losing before Staley got fired were
Yeah.
pretty tight games. And he used to go to the podium and say that, and he'd say, we're right there," but they kept losing. They weren't getting the
Mhm.
results. So I say that to say, I mean, that guy was a complete moron. So if you bring in Bill Belichick, you certainly would think, hey, we're going to dot the T's or dot the I's and cross the T's, and also at the end of game, he should be able to manage the clock much better than the other guy we had here. You know, you correct a couple of those mistakes. It's a
Right.
big difference. Maybe
Mhm.
a couple of those games you win now. You're talking 3 or 4 games, tight games that you were losing before. Now you win. That changes a whole season. But Harbaugh is really the guy in terms of innovation for the offense, taking them to that next step. I just know he's a Michigan man. And look, they won the Natty. They have all the talent in the world. The playoff expands now, so they should
Mhm.
be a stalwart in terms of being in the playoffs every year from here on out. Even there's sanctions possibly coming there. I don't think Harbaugh would want to leave them high and dry with that. I just wouldn't be shocked if he stays in college. But there's no question, you and I agree, the Chargers is the best job available.
So let me pose you this question. Between the Chargers, Falcons, potentially maybe Dallas,
Yep,
maybe. Maybe Philadelphia,
yep,
maybe. The Raiders, maybe, because there's no decision based on who will be the head coach there, whether if it's going to be Antonio Pierce or if they're going to
right.
go in a different direction and so forth. With all of these head coaching openings that are currently here right now in the NFL, where do you think that Bill Belichick will land, and where do you believe is the best fit for him to go at this current juncture in his career?
I would look at Washington. You know,
Ooh,
new
wow.
ownership group, deep pockets. They just hired a really great front office, put that together. A lot of smart guys there. You know, I would think Bill may be a good hire for them in the sense that maybe you give him a short-term deal with a ton of money, and he just comes in and builds a culture. I mean,
Mm,
who's a better guy to build a culture, to do your job, the no days off, you know, instill some discipline, some pride back into that once proud franchise, you know, and maybe he's not the long term answer. Certainly, you know, maybe you give him a 4-year deal, he passes Shula, and then so, I don't think any of us think the guy's going to coach forever.
no.
So maybe
Mm,
maybe he rides off in the sunset then, and you bring in the young coach to take what he built and see if he can get to the next step. But I think that makes a lot of sense. He's familiar with the area, obviously, with the Naval Academy being right there, where you know his dad coached forever, and he has an affinity for. I just think it makes a lot of sense. You could damn sure sell some tickets with Bill
yeah.
Belichick, and you know, obviously, probably a new quarterback. I would assume they're going to draft a kid, so that's a pretty exciting new direction. I would think of Bill Belichick and a young rookie quarterback. It's sort of the new direction there for the Washington Commanders.
To pick a spot for for Bill Belichick in terms of where I think he may go and where it would be the best fit for him right now, I'm going to go hot take here, and I'm going to go say that I really, really think it's Philadelphia. I really do think it's the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is my reason why. The reason is because we talked about quarterbacks. You have that in Jalen Hurts. You have the franchise guy in Jalen Hurts. Say what you will about him right now, and the anger and the angst and the frustration in Philadelphia is 100% warranted towards Jalen Hurts because Jalen Hurts was in fact part of the problem. And as someone who watched the Eagles week in and week out by and large throughout the entire season,
Yep.
he was part of the problem over the last 7 weeks, including on the postseason that was just yesterday.
Yep.
So the question is Jalen Hurts the guy? The question is, can Jalen Hurts return back to the 2022 form where he wasn't turning the football over as much? And then also defensively, I'm sure there is going to be a lot of turnover and change because Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham may not be back with the Eagles next season.
Right.
Jason Kelsey, according to multiple reports, retired, has chosen to enter retirement. The
Mm-hmm.
greatest center in the history of the NFL. And that's not hyperbole speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the pieces are there. I mean, who knows what happens with AJ Brown because AJ Brown is clearly not happy with whatever situation that had transpired and so forth. I do think that Nick Sirianni, there's a chance that he may get the boot.
Mm-hmm.
And for the mere fact that you start the season 10-1 and you lose 6 of the final 7 games, including the playoffs, to end your season. This is an all-time NFL all-time collapse. Some
Yep.
people are saying that we haven't seen anything like this since the 1986 New York Jets. I think this is worse. Maybe it's
Yeah.
revisionist history. Maybe it's just recency bias. But honestly, for a team that lacked discipline
Yep.
at times, what better guy to come in or to bring in than Bill Belichick, who is going to whip that secondary into better shape, and I'm not talking football shape, because they missed more tackles than passengers missing the T this morning in Boston. That's how bad it was. Like, you can
Yep.
count the amount of missed tackles that there was in last night's game between the Eagles and Buccaneers in Tampa Bay. That's how porous the tackling was. It's
Yep.
something that you really don't see from Bill Belichick coach defenses. You just don't. So I
Yeah.
do think that Bill Belichick with the Eagles, I
Yeah.
don't think it's the worst idea in the world. I really don't. I could actually see it happening.
I could too. And I'll tell you this. This is kind of funny. It's going to make you laugh if you think about this.
Mm-hmm.
In that NFC East, Dallas will have interest in Bill Belichick
Oh
potentially.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia, we just talked about. Washington, I made the case for. Every single team in that division will have interest in Bill Belichick except the one that he loves the most and respects the most, and that's the New York Football Giants. How about that? The one he would take in a second, not interested.
Because they have someone in Brian Daboll. But I would pose this question to the Giants organization. If Bill Belichick called the offices in East Rutherford, New Jersey tomorrow and said, "Hi, this is Bill Belichick. I just wanted to call in just to check in and see if that head coaching job is
That's a damn good bill right there."
I'm pretty interested in the opportunity, and I think
that's a good bill.
We can definitely improve this team and get this team back on the right tracks.
Absolutely.
So,
Even the clearing of the throat.
You can reach me at any time. I'm going to be on my yacht in Martha's Vineyard. So all right. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bill living good in
I'm
New
telling
England.
you, Bill, I'm telling you, if Bill calls tomorrow, East Rutherford, saying I'm interested in the job, you mean to tell me that they're not going to be taking a hard look at Brian Daboll and saying,
absolutely,
I mean, listen, and I get that right now that Brian Daboll is basically the mid-age wife.
Right.
Bill Belichick is basically the gilf in the situation, but he's the golden egg of them all. You mean to tell me that you're not going to be somewhat interested? I mean, come on. I mean, the interest has got to be there on some level, and it's New York. Come on.
Well, here's my concern.
Sure.
You know, Brian Daboll, he had a really good year with Daniel Jones, and it feels like he got Daniel Jones as high as he could get him, and he couldn't sustain it. Mm-hmm. And they're going to have some tough conversations at that quarterback position. I just watched Bill Belichick coach Mac Jones into the ground, and Bailey Zappi, I don't think Bailey Zappi had a chance to begin with. So
no.
I am not interested in watching Bill Belichick and Daniel Jones. I mean, I would much rather have a root canal with no Novocaine than to watch that. So, you know, if you're selling me on the Giants, he better get a quarterback, which is why I think these other places are much more, even Washington, in a sense, that I brought up. I mean, they pick second overall. They should be drafting a quarterback, you know? Mm-hmm. So even there, it's like, fix the defense. They have some weapons offensively, and then you got a kid. You're starting from scratch. It kind of makes sense. Him and Daniel Jones sounds like a nightmare on Elm Street. I want no parts of it.
I mean, in this case, it'll be the Nightmare on Broadway. You don't want to see Les Miserables on the Pike in New Jersey. Like, that's something you don't want to have happen.
Absolutely.
So right now, as it currently stands, we're entering divisional week. Wild card weekend done, and it was a complete dud, in my opinion. I felt like, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like out of the 6 games this entire weekend, there was 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, and 2 yesterday. Right. Only one was worthy of watching. Only one, and that was the Rams and Lions game. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a pretty good game from beginning to end. Yep. So, in terms of just the NFL in itself, as we look ahead to the divisional weekend, I am genuinely intrigued by the quarterbacks that are left in the playoffs. And we're going to go through every one of them. We're going to go through with Houston, CJ Stroud, who just picked apart the best pass rush, in my opinion, in the NFL in the Cleveland Browns.
Right.
That's to start there. Lamar Jackson, the general consensus NFL MVP, who is more than quarterbacky enough to lead a team to a potential Super Bowl if, in fact, he gets out of the divisional round, which is something he hasn't done. Actually, yeah, he hasn't done yet.
Right.
And then Kansas City, obviously with Mahomes, defending Super Bowl champions. Buffalo, the most dangerous team in the NFL playoffs, Josh Allen. And then you look at the NFC, Jared Goff, Detroit.
Yep.
And then you look at San Francisco, Brock Purdy. You look at I mentioned Detroit, I mentioned San Francisco,
Jordan Love,
Jordan Love, Green Bay.
Yeah.
You look there as well, and then also I would, yeah, you also the last one, and I know I'm drawing blanks at the moment.
Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield, thank you, of Tampa Bay.
Yep.
Between those eight guys, which one do you believe, in your opinion, has the best odds or the best chances to hoist the Vince Lombardi Trophy in less than a month in Vegas?
I can't believe I'm saying this based on the question, which is pure quarterback. Sure. But I think with the supporting cast around him, and I think with what the team asked him to do, which is almost less than some of these other guys. The Bills are dependent on Josh Allen. The Ravens are dependent on Lamar, so on and so forth. I would answer that question you asked me with Brock Purdy, and he's not even my favorite quarterback in that whole group. And the reason is because I think Brock Purdy is asked to do the least out of a lot of these quarterbacks we named.
I agree.
I mean, I really do. It's just get the ball. You're surrounded by playmakers. Get the ball in their hands. He gets it out quickly.
Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, CMC, Debo. Oh my God!
He just gets a ball. He processes quickly at the line. He reads a defense. He knows where to go immediately with the ball. Defenses are not as complex as they used to be. The tackling's not as good as it used to be. You can't smoke the quarterback like you could back in the day. And we saw last year, remember, that Eagles defense last year was completely different than the garbage we just watched this year.
Yeah.
And they were able, quite literally, to knock him out of that game. Right? I don't look at any of these defenses right now in the NFC and see that at all. So I just think, I think Brock Purdy is going to be able to lead that team to the Super Bowl. And I actually believe the 49ers are going to win it.
To answer my own question, in terms of out of the remaining quarterbacks left in the divisional round, as we're about to embark upon that this weekend, I think the best quarterback left to possibly win it all is Josh Allen. Because Josh Allen right now is playing like a certain quarterback that I remember from 12 years ago. And I have been a long-withstanding believer in this very notion. The best team to win the Super Bowl is not usually the best team. It's been historically the hottest team going into the playoffs.
Yep.
We saw in the last 20 years, we have seen this with the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2005.
That's right.
We saw this with the New York Giants in 2007.
Yep.
We saw this with the Green Bay Packers in 2010. We saw this with the New York Giants in 2011. We saw this, and I would go as far as to say like 2017, after the Eagles lost their starting quarterback, Carson Wentz, to injury. And here comes as what he's known in Philadelphia, Big Dick Nick Foles, 2017, and then now. You fast forward to currently, and you look at Josh Allen and the way that he has been playing.
Man.
When he doesn't turn the football over, he is lethal.
Yes.
He is among the elite of the elite quarterbacks in the league. And I'm talking about he's up there with Mahomes. Yes. Sorry, Chiefs fans, but it's the God honest truth.
Mm-hmm.
So with the way that they're playing right now, offensively, I'm just sticking with the quarterback for a moment. I can go into the whole matchups and everything like that, but quarterbacks right now, you're not going to sell me on a hotter quarterback right now going into the division round than Josh Allen. Because what he's doing between throwing the football and running the ball is exemplary. It's just amazing what he's been able to do over the course of the last 7 weeks, including their wild card win over the Steelers. So for me, Josh Allen is that dude right now. And he reminds me an awful lot of that 2011 Giants team that had Eli Manning, who got hot at the right time and went on that Super Bowl championship run that year. That's what Josh Allen is reminding me of right now.
Yeah, listen, and that's what makes the matchup between him and Mahomes this weekend.
TV.
It's must see because think about this. As you were describing all those years where those teams got hot.
Yes.
I'm just thinking back to Eli's playoff run, beating Rodgers, beating Brady in a Super Bowl twice. I mean, these are legacy shaping moments, legacy shaping games. How about the run that the Ravens, that's another team that got hot and got in during that Flacco.
You're right. Yes.
That Flacco run. They went on the road. They beat Denver. That was Peyton Manning's Broncos.
Yes.
They beat Andrew Luck and the Colts. They beat Brady in Foxborough. And then they win the Super Bowl in the Harbaugh Bowl. So, I mean, there's just so many examples of, quarterbacks getting hot and going head to head. And the route in which you win the Super Bowl is legacy building. So, because there is a flip side to this coin, my friend. Look, Mahomes, if we're comparing him to all these greats, we've seen the greats do more with less as they got older and people left with free agency and trades. Correct. I mean, we saw Brady win how many times with pretty much no-name receivers except Julian Edelman, right? And then Gronk later also. But I just look at this as a Mahomes moment of you go on the road, you beat that red-hot team, you beat Josh Allen again in the playoffs.
Which would make him 3-0, by the way, against Josh Allen.
So this is legacy building stuff. I can't wait to watch.
Which is why, on that very point there, which is why I think this game, and this is hyperbole, take it for what it is.
Yep.
But I think this game is a legitimate legacy game already for Josh Allen before the Super Bowl. Yep. Why? Because you got to keep this in mind. Josh Allen in his career, I think in the regular season is, I believe, 2-1 or 3-1 against Mahomes. But in the playoffs, Josh Allen is 0-2 against Mahomes.
Yep.
The Bills during this era of Josh Allen and Sean McDermott have never been more hotter than what they are right now.
That's right.
If they beat Mahomes, on Sunday night, I think this team actually goes on to win it all. And mark my words now. I really sincerely believe it because, again, I've seen this movie before. And you have a pretty good memory yourself. I have a pretty damn good memory myself. I just listed all of the examples in the last 20 years of teams that have gotten hot at the right time.
Yep.
And have gone on Super Bowl championship runs at that. And this is what the Bills are on right now, which is why I think that this game against the defending Super Bowl champions, against Patrick Mahomes, who, by the way, I must also add, he's playing in his first ever road playoff game as well.
Yeah.
So this is a legacy game for Josh Allen himself. And I strongly believe that he is the best quarterback left remaining in the playoffs out of the 8 that are remaining. But I do believe this is Josh Allen's time to really elevate and go on that run and finally get to the Super Bowl because the Bills are they are that hot right now.
Yeah, I agree. And here's the other part. Both of these teams are completely different than that 13 seconds playoff game we got a few years back, which still feels like
2021. Yes.
I mean, one of the best games I ever watched in my life. And so now I look at it as the way James Cook has come on and running the ball for Buffalo, the way Isaiah Pacheco runs with such violence.
A
I
small
mean,
guy. Mm-hmm.
I could see this being a low scoring rock'em sock'em, two great defenses going at it, methodical chess piece coaching with Andy Reid and McDermott. I could see this being a lower scoring, tight game, and the difference being in which quarterback makes those plays in the moments,
Right.
those plays to keep the chains moving, to extend the drive, when you
Mm-hmm.
get in the red zone, scoring a touchdown as opposed to a field goal, right? I mean, those moments, who doesn't turn the ball over? So it's a legacy defining game, and one that I don't think will be defined by stats as much as it will moments, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
it makes perfect sense because in the playoffs, that's how quarterbacks are defined. Moments. I mean, stats are nice and dandy, but when we utter the name Tom Brady, what's the first
Yep.
thing that comes to mind? It's not
Yep.
stats; it's moments.
That's right.
Like and that's what it's going to come down to for Josh Allen as well. So I want to pivot back to local, and I want to
Okay.
specifically touch on the Red Sox because the Red Sox have found a way to really anger the fan base yet again. And it's definitely something that is worthy of discussion here because today, and I I don't understand what on earth was that all about in terms of what was what was um what was revealed
Yeah.
in the Boston Globe today.
Yep.
And it's a dark day for Boston Red Sox fans. And I'm not sitting here dancing on graves or making fun of the Red Sox for any stretch of the imagination. But I want to read you this excerpt here that was from the Boston Globe. This is this was from Craig Breslow, the new chief of baseball operations guy for the Red Sox. And it said, quote, "That's a fair question. As I've gotten to know this organization better through the conversation I've had with ownership, they are still supportive of assembling a World Series team as quickly as we possibly can. But I think the reality is that it's going to require a step forward from the young position players. It's going to require the build out of a talent pipeline of arms that we can acquire, we draft, we can develop internally. And it's going to require aggressive player development in the minor leagues and the major leagues. So guys that we think are the next wave. We're talking about Marcelo Meyer and Anthony and Teal. That group are not just big leaguers, but impact big leaguers. The convergence of all those pieces is the fastest path to a World Series team. We want to build this way. We want to build this thing in a way that there's not just quality once in a while, but there's quality paired with consistency. When I read that, I was of the sheer disbelief, like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Because I have publicly blasted Hein Bloom's inability and unwillingness to spend money,
Hmm.
especially to spend money on homegrown premium talent. And I'm talking about most notably Mookie Betts and Xander Bogaerts.
Sure.
But what that sounded like to me was, this isn't just a Hein Bloom issue. This is Craig Breslow playing the role of the puppet from Sesame Street for John Henry. And if you're a Red Sox fan, you should be angry. And the fan base is pretty angry right now, and
They're
rightfully
angry.
so.
Yeah. Yep.
The Red Sox continue to find ways to not want to spend because what they put out there and what was quoted in the quotes that I just read was utter bullshit. It was bullshit because big market teams are spending money and making moves this offseason. You go look at the Dodgers. They just spent pretty much $1 billion in
Yeah. Basically.
contracts
Yep.
in signing the two premium guys that were available, Yamamoto and Altani. The
Yep.
Yankees, they went out and they acquired Juan Soto. And that remains to
Right.
be seen whether if he's going to be signed long-term with the Yankees. They also went out and they got Marcus Stroman as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are the Red Sox doing here? Telling its fan base the best way to build a World Series team is to hope that these guys, these young guys that we draft and develop, are not only major leaguers but impact major leaguers. Stop.
Yeah.
Stop. What you just screamed to Red Sox Nation is that this is an organization that thinks on the level of the New York Mets when the Wilpons were in charge. That's pathetic. It's gross. And you have got to wonder at this point. And I'll ask you this, Travis. When you hear this and when you see this and you hear the anger and the frustration of Red Sox fans, and it's justifiable now.
Yep.
What do you even say? What do you even do? Like, if you're the Red Sox, if you're truly serious about returning back to contention, because they just gave you a bunch of excuses. It's nonsense, and it's just unfair.
Yeah, I mean the thing that's maddening for me the most is there are guys still available that they just have no interest in, from a Montgomery to a Snell, you name it. I mean, obviously, I sort of look at it as, why even get rid of Hein Bloom at this point, right? If this is what we're doing. And here's the other thing. I think they could word things differently. Like, hey, we have a plan. We're going to keep the cost low now, develop our young talent. There's a free agent crop coming in 2 years or 1 year, or we're looking to the future, in year 3 of a rebuild or whatever. They're not putting anything. They're not giving. It's not transparent. And what they're saying is, we're going full throttle and we're going to make all these moves, but the moves aren't happening. I'll give you a funny story. I remember at the trade deadline, Lucas Giolito got dealt like a week before the deadline.
Yeah.
As we were leading up to it, I said, you get him in here now, and then that way he's already here. He's acclimated. You get some innings from him. He could eat innings up for you at the second half of last season. And then in the off season, you bring in some arms. I like Lucas Giolito if he's my 4th, 5th starter. I think he could be nasty in that role. Now, I mean, he's one of your top guys. I don't love that.
He's probably your number 2 pitcher right now, behind
Right
Bayo,
behind Bayo, right behind Bayo. Yeah. I don't love that. So I just think it's not moving the needle, that's for sure. And, again, I think if they were telling fans, hey, be patient, we're 2 years away, we have a plan, that would be one thing. But when you tell the fans you're going full throttle and you don't, that's not a good look.
It's a bad look, and it makes you completely untrustworthy. And for an organization and for its fan base, and in a city like Boston, where trust is a very fickle thing, you said in your own words, we're going full throttle.
That's right.
Your full throttle is equivalent to the speed of the green line when it's had its speed restrictions. Slow, almost non-existent.
Right.
Like, what the actual hell is this? And you wonder why you have people that are so turned off by the organization. I've seen this throughout the day on Twitter. Why bother this summer spending any money going to see the Red Sox at Fenway? Why? So you can continue to charge the highest prices of tickets in the major leagues for a product that's not even worthy of watching, if we're being completely honest. So to me, the problem that lies within this is you cannot sit here and continue to attempt to pull sheep's wool over the eyes of Red Sox fans and say that we're going full throttle. We're in it to win it. Our aim is to still build a World Series winning team. And then your actions contradict the very purpose you claim to be serving. That, to me, doesn't inspire confidence. that inspires distrust, that inspires anger, and that sure as hell inspires a fractured relationship, because no relationship can thrive with the lack of trust, lack of communication. It's not the lack of verbal communication, it's the lack of action behind those said words. And that's where the Red Sox organization is with its fan base right now.
Amen, brother. And listen, you look at that division. I mean, Yankees improved.
They did.
The Orioles, just by the sake of getting playoff experience and getting older, they improved. You know,
And they're
the
still a
Blue.
young team, by the way. Still a
That's
young
what I
team.
mean. That's what I mean. So by default, now getting some experience, they're just better. The Rays, we've been waiting on them to fall off a cliff. It hasn't happened, so I don't believe it's going to happen now. And the Blue Jays, also a young team. So, and really, if you think about it, the Blue Jays' time is now. They should be
It is.
peaking right now. So that's a talented team. It's just it's going to be tough sledding again this season, unless there are, as I mentioned, there are still guys out there. They could go out and get a couple arms, and I think we would all feel better. But as of right now, it's not looking like that's going to happen.
A Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery would actually do wonders for the Red Sox rotation, but the ownership and as well as the management's unwillingness to spend money is
Right.
basically what's hemorrhaging this team in this franchise at this moment in time. Now, speaking of teams,
Yep.
because I gotta touch on the Celtics. The
Hmm.
Celtics, they just have this aura around this team right now where, I hate that I find myself getting to this place, but I'm already there. But there's something different about this year's team that we haven't seen
That's
in
right.
any of the previous teams in the last 5 years.
Yep.
And I'm dead serious. Like,
Hmm.
back last September, when they acquired Drew Holiday in that
Hmm.
massive trade, and they also acquired Kristaps Porzingis,
Yep.
I had an inkling then. I believe that the Celtics actually somehow actually got better, as even having just traded Marcus Smart to the Memphis Grizzlies. But this team somehow found a way to get better.
Yeah.
And what I've seen so far, despite the fact that they had an impressive win the other night against the Toronto Raptors,
Hmm.
they had that impressive win against the best defensive team in the NBA in the Minnesota Timberwolves, and then laid an absolute clunker in Milwaukee against the Bucks Thursday night. And I got frustrated with them in my last episode about the fact that they're so freaking inconsistent in terms of just the night to night level of intensity, but they did end up riding the ship.
Hmm.
So I'll ask you this: what is one weakness that the Celtics have right now that you think could be the fatal flaw that prevents this team from winning banner number 18 this June?
I wouldn't call it a weakness. I would call it a concern of mine. So the first thing I'll do is give them credit. I
Yeah.
think the improvement from year one to year two of Joe Mazzulla
Mhm.
has been big. I think I do see a quite frankly a more comfortable coach in the role.
Mhm.
Seems like he has things figured out more in terms of rotation. He's getting the guys to play better defense consistently this season than they were last season. And maybe that's to be expected. I mean, the way in which he got the head coaching job is still mind-boggling to me. With everything that happened with Ime, of course, and then
Yeah.
it was year one on the job, and you have this championship caliber team, and they flamed out. It is what it is. This year, I do see an improvement. With all that being said, that's the one area of concern for me is you get into a deep series, 7-game series, with a really great coach like a Spolstra we've seen
Mhm.
before. I have some concerns there, but I do believe, and you said it, this Celtics team is better than years past. They have more dudes now that can get buckets, and it should, in theory, leave you with a much fresher Jason Tatum come May and June. Knock on wood. So we'll see. And if he's fresher, maybe we get what we've been asking for as fans. Maybe we get the closer in big games. Maybe we get a little more dog from him late in games if he's got more in the tank. Because on any given night, Porzingis, Holiday, and obviously we know Jaylen Brown and even Derek White can light you up. So I like this team. I think they get out of the East no problem. The Milwaukee Bucks do not scare me at all. They do not play defense. They can score. They can run and gun with you, but that's advantage Celtics if you're playing that way. I just don't believe the Bucks play enough defense to matter. The Heat don't have the horses. You can't trust some of these other teams like the Sixers and the Cavs, and so I think the
I would
Celtics
even
come out of
include
the
the Knicks too.
yeah, absolutely. So
Oh yeah.
I think the Celtics come out of the East with relative ease, and then the Western Conference, whoever that. Bro. Timberwolves, OKC, Kings. You can never count out LeBron. There's a lot of teams out there that could potentially be a problem. Maybe the Clippers finally get their act together. So whoever comes out of West will be, and obviously we know the Nuggets. Whoever comes out of the West will be a daunting task. But I think the Celtics win the championship this year. I really believe that.
I think the number one concern for me, and when it comes to the Celtics, is the big man, the center role.
Yep.
And I say that because, and this is no slight against Al Horford. This is no slight against what he brings to the table in terms of the intangibles that he brings, obviously being a veteran and being a leader on this team and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't help but to think he's another year older. He's going to be playing against fresher bigs in the playoffs.
Yep.
And I think that during the second half of the NBA season, it's going to be imperative that Coach Mazzulla finds a way to keep him fresh
Yep.
because you really are going to need him at his best, not at 60, not at 50, not at 70%.
Yep.
You're going to need him at his absolute best when when the playoffs come around. And I think that right now the longevity and the health
Mm-hmm.
of Al Horford is my biggest concern. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's crazy to say that, yeah, because he is an older player. He is another year older. How
That's
much
right.
tread how much tread does he still have on those tires? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we won't really know until once the playoffs begin in April. So we're still like 3 months away from the playoffs, but I do think that if you're Brad Stevens
Mm-hmm.
and if you're looking towards the NBA trade deadline, I would look to see if you can add maybe another big that can
Yep.
give you some minutes off the bench
Yep.
and one more winger off the bench just to deepen your bench just a little bit.
Yep. Yep.
Because
I,
I
yep.
think I think if there's one thing that I've learned over the last couple of postseasons, last year obviously the Denver Nuggets winning it all.
Mm-hmm.
And then the year before, obviously the Warriors in that unforgettable
Mm-hmm.
6-game NBA Finals against the Celtics.
Yep.
Your bench can never be too deep.
That's right.
It will only help you come the playoffs. If I'm the Celtics, I'm looking to add one more big that can come off the bench, and as well as one more winger that can also get you an additional 15 points. You're not asking him to score 25, just give you 15 points off the bench. That's
Right.
all.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. Listen. You know who I was thinking about when you were talking about Biggs?
Mm-hmm.
He would be perfect on this team. And maybe that ship has sailed and I got to let it go. And I understand why you had to give him up. But Robert Williams on this team right
He
now,
would have been perfect, but
be perfect.
health was the reason why they moved on. That's the only reason why.
Well, I just mean what
He
he
can't stay
does and
healthy. That
his
was the
style.
issue.
Yeah, it was. But man, what he brings to the table, if you could bring him off the bench on this team, it's really exactly what you're asking for. You get a rim protector, a guy that can run the floor, give you some quality minutes, high energy guy. It'd just be perfect. It'd be perfect on this team.
I couldn't agree more. And I want to touch on the Bruins real quick before I switch off of sports, because
Okay.
Bruins right now, I mean, they're number 2 in the NHL standings. And
Yep.
the thing that I find to be the most amazing about where they are and how they've gotten to this point is the Bruins, they have had a lot stacked up against them this
Hmm.
season.
Hmm.
They have.
Yep.
You talk about like what this team has gone through in terms of injuries, in terms of um players that they've lost like
Yep.
last off season.
Yep.
When you talk about losing guys like Bergeron, Krejci, Hall, Foligno, Noshek, Smith, Studnicka,
Yep.
Olaf, Hathaway, Bertuzzi, all in one off season last summer. And
Mm.
then you turn around to play on with the injuries of key guys like Linus Olmark, your starting goaltender, Derek Forbort, Brandon Carlo, and Tomasz Noshek as well on that fourth line.
Yep.
And yet they're number 2 in the NHL in terms of the standings. And I just wonder, as we are approaching All-Star break in a couple of weeks, just 2 weeks away, if you're the Boston Bruins, what are you thinking about doing in terms of potentially any moves that you may want to make just for the stretch run as you get closer to the Stanley Cup playoffs? Because this is a team right now that is not as deep as last year's team was, that which was an absolute wagon. That
Yeah.
team last year was a wagon, but this team is not. But somehow they are arguably the best team in the East, arguably one of the teams to beat in the East. You know, some people may say the New York Rangers, and I wouldn't like quibble against that. I wouldn't be upset if they said the Rangers are the team to beat in the East right now.
Yeah.
But if you're the Boston Bruins, like how do you add or potentially provide any sort of reinforcements as this team gets ready for it's now in the second half of the regular season, but especially after the All-Star break?
Yeah. I mean, listen, you could say Rangers, you could say the Panthers are right there again this year
Yeah.
too. You really kind of have the same cast of characters. I don't think the Flyers score enough, but their defense, they're pretty good in goal. I'd throw them in there. You always have the Hurricanes who play well at home. There's a ton of teams in the East, but I would argue, I think the Bruins, this currently constructed Bruins team, is better built for postseason than last season. I think
Mm,
with all of the records and the flash and the goals and all the regular season wins and all that stuff from last year. Listen, man, you and I talked about this before we started the podcast. I told you how many years I covered those Washington Capitals teams
yeah.
that were very similar. I mean, best team in the regular season, broke all these records. Ovi's doing everything against whoever. And then it just wasn't really conducive to playoff hockey. You get in the first round or the second round and you get bullied, you get pushed around. And that's what the Panthers did to this team last year. I think this team, with defense leaning on the goalies even more this year than they did last year,
Mhm.
I just think that style lends itself more so to a deeper playoff run. We'll see how far they go. For my money, I think we're going to get Bruins Avs in the finals. I really do. Nathan McKinnon's just ridiculous. I think he's going to win
Yeah.
the Hart Trophy, to be honest with you. So I think we're going to get Avalanche Bruins in the finals. But as far as the trade deadline, I look, I wouldn't give up a ton to get it. I think defensively you have to get healthy as well, but I would be looking to maybe just add one more scorer to help out. I mean, we understand Pasta and Marchi are getting it done. Some nights Coyle will give it to you. Some nights DeBrusque is the guy. Some nights take your pick. It's
Trent
someone
Frederick.
else.
Yeah.
But if I can get a guy, just another one to add to that rotation where I know a couple nights, especially in the playoffs, this dude's gonna light the back of the net for me, I would probably go and make that move. Preferably a veteran if I could. I wouldn't even be trying to get a young guy. I'd want someone who's been around the block and has some playoff experience. I'd kick the tires on that guy.
As much fun as I had talking sports with you, I gotta shift off of sports because I think one of the things that drew me to you when we met a couple of months ago
Hmm.
was that you seem to have like something that within your personality that just made you like immediately relatable. Like we like was almost as if we immediately clicked. And
Absolutely.
I'm not saying to blow smoke up your ass or anything like that. I mean that genuinely. And I've always been a big believer that every man has a story, especially the journey that you've been on.
Hmm.
Before coming to Boston, you were in DC and you worked at Team 980, and as well as you worked for NBC Sports Washington, which is now Monumental Sports Network.
Yep.
Take us through that time period, like that experience in working in the DC market, and what are some similarities, some differences between the Boston market and the Washington DC market where you previously worked?
Well, first of all, I want to go back to us connecting the way we did. When I got here to town, I was really looking for people that looked like me and sounded like me.
Mm,
And they were few and far between, but there were a couple, and you were one of them. And
mm,
I am just a fan. As I told you when we first met, I had followed you immediately. So I had a pretty good baseline for what you were about outside of sports, even just how you carried yourself and you conduct yourself and how you represent, not just for your people, but for all people. And so I had a real appreciation for that. So when I met you, you know, officially, which I knew would happen eventually. Shout outs to Necta for making it
yes,
happen when they did. But I
yes.
knew we crossed paths eventually, and what you got was just a manifestation of what I had felt about you leading up to that moment of actually meeting you. I had consumed a lot of your work and was just a fan. What you felt was really a fan moment, and I wanted to give you your flowers and give you your appreciation. But
Thank you.
in terms of the DC market, I mean, I'm from there, man. I'm from the DMV, so I'm a Maryland boy. Went to college in Baltimore, covered all the Baltimore teams first to start my career, and
Mm,
then worked my way up to that DC market. It's the top 10 huge market, obviously. And,
yeah.
um, was just blessed to be able to do radio and TV and podcasts, you name it, behind the scenes, everything. And, the similarities really are that I would lump in Baltimore and DC and say that they're both great sports towns, and in the case of Baltimore, it's a great seafood town. So
Mm,
coming to Boston, a lot of people who knew me well said, "You're going to work there because it's a sports town and it's a seafood town. It's two
oh
things that
yeah.
I love." And
Hmm.
so being here, it's just colder than where I'm from, and it snows more, but it's really very similar. I would give Boston the edge in terms of sports town. I mean, I don't really think there's anywhere better for me in this country. You could argue New York, you could argue LA, you could argue a lot of places. But I believe being here and feeling what I feel and getting the reaction that I've got from listeners and viewers, this is the best sports town in America. There's no question about it.
And first and foremost, I want to say thank you. Like not only it meant the world what you said, but like thank you. I've grown to become like a pretty big fan of yours, in seeing and listening to the work that you that you do. And as I as I mentioned at the beginning, Travis Thomas, he's also on WEI as well, which he does terrific work. I mean, he was also a radio host in the DC market with Team 980 as well. Also, you can also catch him weekdays on NESN on the sports betting show that they do. as well. And secondly, you talked about how Boston, like for you, was going to be like a match, and
Yeah.
how much you you've been able to like resonate in terms of the sports, the passion, and also being a. I mean, New England. I don't think there's any region in the country that's better in terms of seafood than New England. That's no disrespect to Baltimore at all. But when you think of lobsters, you think of Maine. Like
Right.
Maine is where you go for great lobster. And I'm
Yep.
speaking from experience.
Yep. Yep.
Like Maine is where you go for great lobster. I mean, so so like when you talked about how like the energy and the passion and the fans in Boston is truly second to none anywhere else in the country. As a native New Yorker, I have said this for years, and I felt strongly the same way even now. I mean, there's just no comparison. It just isn't.
Yeah.
And this is no disrespect to New York. There's no disrespect to Philly, both cities where I have lived and so forth.
Hmm.
But Boston is a different level. This a very special and unique connection that lies in that city and in that market. Whereas whereas I have come to the conclusion, like, and I don't hide my feelings about it. Like, I genuinely miss Boston. And as someone who is still obviously currently there right now, I would tell you, like, take full advantage every single day and cherish it, because like you just don't know how good you've got it. And I'm sure you're still learning with your family, your kids, and so forth, and your wife.
Yep.
Um, but like you've got it really, really good. I'm not just talking in terms of sports media, but I'm talking
Hmm.
about in terms of just life and being able to connect with people in that city and in that region, because it's special, man. It is absolutely special. And I think about it every day. I think about it every day. I think about like just before I left. And I remember saying to myself, and I was telling to some people off social media, that I think one of the biggest things that I said at the time that I was going to miss was the relationships that I built with so many people, and
Hmm.
it's far too many, both social media and especially in real life. I mean, it was something really incredible to be stopped walking around Brookline where I lived at the time,
Hmm.
and have people literally stop and tell me, like, "Are you so and so?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, dude, I respect the hell out of you, man. Like, yo, I'm a big fan of you, and I didn't, as I appreciated it then, but I didn't realize just how much, like, that, and just so many. It's countless examples of that over the last few years where I got that. And I'm sure that you've that you get that as well, especially being on TV and radio in Boston. So I'll ask you this, as someone who looks like me
Hmm.
and is and one day, God willing, I aspire to get on the level that you are at. What does that mean to you when you travel around Boston or even the Boston area, and you're recognized, and you're able to connect with so many different people and fans who care so deeply about the teams that you cover, both from a just pure sports talk perspective and as well as a sports betting perspective as well?
It means everything to me. I mean, I'll tell you the story. So
Sure.
when I was in DC, this is what made me realize it was like a front runner town. Was
Mm,
the Caps. This was before the Stanley Cup run. They just
mm,
kept losing the Penguins, and
mm.
one year I remember they lost to the Habs in the first round. It was just like heartbreak
Yeah.
after heartbreak. Bruins beat them a couple times. So there was one particular night. It was a miracle that I was off of work. I don't even know how that happened. I probably worked a bunch of days in a row or something, and they were like forced to give me off. So I was off, and it was a Caps playoff game night.
Mm,
And so me and my then fiance, who's now my wife, went out um, in DC. We went to it wasn't a sports bar, but
Mm,
we sat. It was a restaurant, but we sat at the bar so we could watch the game.
mm,
And we get in there, and I don't remember what the hell they had on TV, but it definitely wasn't the game. And so I said to the bartender, "Hey, can you put that on the Caps playoff game, please?" And they were like, "The who?" And I said, "The Washington Capitals playoff game. Can we get that on the TV here?" What channel's that? And I was just like, "Oh my
wow.
god!" So I share that story to say when I moved here, before my wife and kids had moved here, I was just living out of a motel basically until we, got our housing straight and they moved up.
Uh,
And
uh,
so I took the T for my first time, right? And
mm,
so I'm on the T, and I'm 1,000% sure this was either a first or second date. I could tell by how the couple was talking to each other. It was
mhm.
early in the game. And
Yeah.
so I kind of was like eavesdropping. So I like sat a little closer so I could hear them because I felt like the guy was a little awkward. So that was funny to me. So I was like listening in. And bro, when I tell you they were breaking down the Bruins third line, it was incredible. I was like, they're having a they're connecting right now
Mhm.
in an awkward trying to connect, trying to find some sort of connection between each other, what they
Yes.
have. And they are talking not just generic Bruins topics, they are breaking down
The
lines
third
here in a
ones.
game. And I'm
Yeah.
like, wow. And that was my moment of like, okay, I've arrived. Like for my career, um, I think a lot of broadcasters could look at it, and I understand this. Who doesn't want to make money? I,
For
I think a
sure.
lot of
Yeah.
broadcasters look at, I'm going to the highest bidder. I want to make the most money. I want the most time. I want whatever. It's all about me, me, me. But what I love about being here is I now feel as though I've made it professionally in sports broadcasting. I'm a sports
Mhm.
broadcaster in Boston. I mean,
Yeah.
it's incredible. It's an honor to me, quite frankly. And
Yes.
and then when you compound that with the fact that I am a black man, I mean, it just makes it even more special to me to represent, the present and the future of the region in terms
Mm.
of race relations. It means everything to me, man. I really do. I understand how fortunate I am, and I love it every day.
Yeah, and just listening to you like intently, um, like really like share your thoughts and your feelings in that story made me smile because because like that I was like that is Boston literally in a nutshell, like where Boston culturally, the Bruins are truly everything, and obviously, like the college hockey scene in Boston and throughout New England, not just
Yep.
Boston, is
Yep.
tremendous. You obviously got University of New Hampshire, so many collegiate
Yep.
teams, New Hampshire, Vermont, obviously the University of Maine,
Yep.
obviously Rhode Island, et cetera, et cetera. Throughout New England, hockey is huge, but especially like with the Bruins, like and
Yep.
just you sharing with me that moment, it actually made me miss home even more. And I still
Hmm.
call Boston home, like because of the fact that for me, um, I understand exactly what you said and what you were saying when you said that that you've made it you feel like you've made it in Boston in terms of being a sports broadcaster in that market and understanding just how fortunate you are
Hmm.
because like I know that it is very few and far and in between in terms of men that look like us,
Yep.
that are even able to do it on whether if it's a medium level or even at the highest level professionally.
Right.
And I, for example, like, just to share with you a similar story. So in the spring of 2015,
Hmm.
it's just like literally towards the end of my college years in New York at LIU. I'll always remember this distinct memory that I would do because it really was kind of like my first window and glimpse
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how I ended up falling in love with Boston in itself. So it's
Mm-hmm.
spring of 2015, and I am listening to WEI on TuneIn.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, it was the Dale and Holly show with Rich Keefe.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of which, just as a tease to the listeners, Dale Arnold, the incomparable, the legendary Dale Arnold, is going to be on the next episode of this
Wow.
podcast later this week. So
Wow.
I'm going to share with him the story in full when I talk to him on the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm listening to him and Michael Holly, also black man, works for NBC Sports Boston. He does part time work with 98.5 The Sports Hub now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, oh my god, like
Mm-hmm.
this is like this is the window into Boston sports. I mean, obviously at that time, like we all know, this was in the midst of the Deflate Gate had just started to
Yep.
really kick in terms of fever pitch
Yep.
madness.
Yep.
Obviously at that time the Red Sox were, I mean, they were in the midst of back-to-back back-to-back last place seasons. But the Celtics were in the midst of like they were rebuilding at that time, trying to
Mm-hmm.
gain back their footing, and then the Bruins, they were just in the midst of back-to-back late season collapses. But it was just the
Yep.
passion in which that I got to listen from afar, and it was like, oh my god, this is
Yep.
what this is in Boston. This is what it's all about. Like, oh my goodness. So like now, like when I after I moved to Boston, um, it didn't happen right away, but I begun to really see just the everyday life of the sports scene and how much it really is life in Boston. It's not just like, oh,
That's
it's just
right.
like, no, it is absolutely life. Like you talk about culture. I'm
Mm-hmm.
always gonna remember. I'm always gonna remember this, even now that the Bill Belichick era is over. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
always gonna remember the Tom Brady years, in those formative years, the first 3.5 years, where every Sunday was truly an event. You
Mm-hmm.
walked around anywhere in Boston, anywhere in New England, or even Greater Boston, or Pats gear, and
Wow.
it was a question of where are you going to watch the game. For
Wow.
me, it was the now closed Whiskeys in Back Bay, closed because
Mm-hmm.
of the pandemic.
Mm.
For me, like it was sometimes it would also be um it'd be Tits Tavern in
Mm-hmm.
the Square. It would
Mm-hmm.
be the spot in Burlington,
Mm-hmm.
or there would be this other spot. Like people have their different spots. I had another one called the Draft Bar and Grill in Alston, which, by the
Mm-hmm.
way, they have exemplary like 75% wings
I've been
Sundays and
there.
Mondays.
Yeah, I like it. I
So
like it there. Yeah.
it's so good. It's so good. I'm
Yeah,
having
it
withdrawals
is.
talking about it.
It is
Um,
good. I like that
but
spot.
yeah, like but I say all this to say that like it is literally a way of life. It's not just
Yep.
simply, oh, we just like the team, just passionate. No, it's literally a way of life. It's a culture. It's literally what you live and talk about 365. There isn't an off season. Like, I mean, even
Yep.
the Pats are still talked about heavily, obviously, in the
Yep.
market, even during the spring and the summer, even the Bruins or the Celtics, somehow, somewhere, they're still talking about the Patriots.
That's right.
And I just think that, man, like that is just one of many things I deeply do miss about Boston, and especially being a black man in Boston with the platform that I've been blessed to have built.
That's right.
And I realize now, not I want to say I realize now, but I feel like I have an even deeper understanding as to why I feel the way that I do. And here's what's interesting, Travis, and I gotta share this story with you because it happened at the convention that same weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So that Sunday night after the panel we were blessed to be a part of. It was me, you, Matt McCarthy at 98.5, Megan Ottolini, also your colleague at WEI, um, and and like no, we had one other get member of the panel as well, Molly, Molly, who was also part of that panel, and we go in the bar, and at that point it was Sunday Night Football.
Hmm.
The Pats had already played. That was the same day of the Germany game, the disaster in Germany,
That's right. That's right.
and I remember going into the bar, and we were like just talking post panel. It was me, Molly. We were hanging out, and I remember a moment, just a moment,
Hmm.
where I turned around, and it was I was having conversations with another lovely lady that was at that bar, and as well as Tim Wilkerson, who's just truly a
Hmm.
tremendous man in his own right.
Yep.
And it just clicked, and I remember it was either him or her. It was saying, but someone had said along the lines of, "Shoo, you are you. I hope you understand just how missed you are here." I'm like, and it hit me
Wow.
hard.
Wow.
I'm not BS. You can ask Tim yourself, but
Yeah.
like it hit me hard. Like,
Yeah.
I hope you understand just how missed you are. And I'm like,
Wow.
and it hit me like, damn.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
that was my first moment when I realized this is still home. This
Yeah.
is still it's where my heart still is. It's like, yo, those connections, they never faded away. They never went away. And I ended up leaving, um, just saying to myself, I don't think it's a matter of if. I think it's when I do come back,
Oh,
because
absolutely. We're gonna throw a parade when you come back.
sorry. I'm
We got
not
the
no and I'm not
dumbbells.
I'm not saying this just to say this. No, it's like, I realized, no, it's not a matter of if. And it was like I had a conversation with my mother about this, and it was
Yeah.
like, yeah, like it's not a matter of if for you, it's a matter of when. Like it don't surprise me. Like
Right.
you are a miss. And I've had people on social media, and like, and obviously like the people in my life that still live up in Boston or in the Boston area, they're like, dude, like we miss you, man. And it's like,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I just want to conclude by saying that, man, like that's why I said earlier, I hope you realize, and I now know for a fact that you understand just how fortunate you are,
For
man.
sure.
It is just an unbelievable blessing to
Yes.
be in the best sports market in the country,
Yes.
where it is truly life, and it breathes life into that city, and you're making your mark right now, and I really couldn't be more proud of you, and as well as just being able to admire, and just take draw from inspiration from you to like actually to continue to keep on grinding and so forth. I just wanted to also put that out there as well.
I appreciate that, brother. And listen, man, like it's not a matter of if, like you said, it's a matter of when. And I mean it. When you come back, we jumping on one of them duck boats, baby. Let's go.
I've never done that, even when I
Me
was living
either.
in Boston.
Me
Like, so it's
either.
like, you know what, that actually would be really, really
That'll be fire,
neat.
bro.
That would be neat.
We could
That
do it
really
for
would.
the gram, baby.
For Twitter. Hell yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
for the culture.
yeah, for the culture. It's just funny because someone asked me literally the other day, like, any plans to come back for a visit. I'm just like, oh my god. And it
Yeah,
was just like
man.
I had another person who's asking me like, when are you coming back? And it's like and
Come
I
on.
told that person, I told that person, like, I told him like, same thing I just told you, like,
Yeah.
yeah, like, so it's really, it's not a matter of if, it's really a matter of when. That's really what it is.
Come on home, man. I what I like about here, it's a big city, but it has a small town
That's what,
feel, you know?
nailed it. Nailed
Yeah.
it. That's exactly what it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
I
It's a
love
big
that.
city, but it's got a small town feel, but it's also like everybody knows someone from somewhere.
Right. Right.
And you just don't you just don't realize it until you're like knee deep into, like, oh my god, I know this person from Cambridge, but lives down in Quincy. I have a guy who's
Exactly.
from Dorchester, but he lives down in Brockton now, and so forth. So it's like
Right.
it's like little things like this, like all one massive interconnected web.
That's right.
It's funny, but it's also what makes this region like special. You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
and gotta ask you this because there's two more topics I want to touch on before I conclude.
Okay.
Um, tell me about your story in terms of when you decided to take the job with NESN. Like one, when you were working at Team 980 at that time,
Yeah.
how did it all unfold? And what did your time at Team 980 mean to you as you were working as a radio host in the DC market?
It meant everything, mainly because my whole career, even going back to when I went to college, um, you know, my major was television production, but
Mm,
I always had radio experience because that's where I got the most opportunities. Radio, I was doing sports talk radio in Baltimore.
wow.
When I was behind the scenes in TV, I was just a sports producer.
Mm,
Then I came to DC, behind the scenes in TV, sports producer. But I got an
yeah.
opportunity to be on air at 106.7 The Fan in DC, at Team 980 in DC. So radio was always like sort of, the side piece a little bit. It was always like the part time thing, but TV was always my bread and butter. And then eventually I got on air in television in DC. And, I would do radio on weekends just like I'm doing here at WEEI. But COVID hit. There was a bunch of layoffs at my job. And I had an opportunity to do radio full time for the first time in my career. So I took it. And so I did a show Monday through Friday, not at 9 in the morning to noon. Our ratings were going up, our downloads were going up, we were growing. I did that for a year, and then my agent called me. He was like, "Hey, have you ever heard of NESN?" And I was like, "Yeah." Growing up, even outside of the market, growing
Mm,
up, I would always see Red Sox highlights,
yeah.
courtesy of NESN.
Listen.
And you'd hear the Nat call.
Mhm.
You'd see the post game interview. It'd say courtesy of NESN. Same thing for WEEI. I would always see Brady and Belichick interviewed by them, and it would say courtesy of WEEI. So
Yeah.
I knew these brands, these major brands, even though I was miles away. And
Mm,
so he just told me there was an audition, and he was like, we got to do it. It was like very quick. He was
wow.
like, we're towards the end of the auditions. He mentioned my buddy Sammy P, who was already on air
Yeah.
there. He
Mhm.
was like, Sammy P mentioned you by name, and vouched for you. So if we're going to do this, we got to do it in the next 2 days. I'm like, 2 days, man, I can't make that happen. So
Wow.
sure enough, I did make it happen because it was an opportunity of a lifetime. I flew up, I did my audition, and then the same night I flew out, there was like a blizzard. So I was like, you know what? If I don't get the job, then cool, because there was a damn blizzard there. I don't want to live in that, right? So that's how I did it in my mind. Like,
Yeah.
you get the girl's number. You don't know if she's gonna call you back or not or answer the
Exactly.
phone.
True
So
story.
I was already making like excuses in my head. Like if I don't get the job, I don't want to live there anyway. It's so cold, whatever. And when I got the job, I was so ecstatic. I was like, all right, I got to buy some winter gear. Let's go, baby.
Yeah. Oh
So that's how
man.
it went, man. That's how I got
Uh,
here.
that's incredible. It's like I remember the first time that I had experienced some sort of, I wouldn't say a blizzard, yeah. First
Yeah.
Boston blizzard. Um
Wow.
it was January, believe it was January 2015. Was it 2015? No.
Wow.
It was either that or January 2015 or 16, but It was either it was either one of those two, but it was about 7 or 8 years ago. And I just
Wow.
remember at that time, I remember thinking to myself, yo, this snow here is different. I'm from New York, but this is like, yo, nah, I just want to stay inside. Like, but I just remember like just seeing this. I'm like, look, okay, Boston winner, you win. It is
Yeah.
colder here than it is
Yeah.
in New York. It is colder here
Yes.
than it is in Philly. Like,
Right.
I'm not. You're not gonna beat me. Uh-oh. You're not gonna beat me um in terms of like the winter. It's just not gonna happen. Yeah, and I remember just how cold it was just walking in that snowstorm, and I was going to a Bruins game, no less.
Woo!
So I was yeah, I was just like, yo, what am I doing? But it was just part of the experience. So I felt you on that in terms of flying to flying into Boston and then getting caught in a blizzard for an opportunity of a lifetime. And man, I don't know what it was actually. Just as I said that, I remember there was this is going to be this is crazy thinking about it now that it just came back to me too. Just came back to me. So, fun fact, I think it was 2016. I saw that 1510 WMEX at that time
Hmm.
before it went under the and now it's back again on the radio airwaves in Boston. 1510 WMEX back in I think it was 2016.
Hmm.
They had auditions, like on air auditions for on air hosts and personalities at that station. I caught wind of it. And all I can think of was I got to get up to Boston because I want this opportunity. I don't know if I'm going to get it. I don't know if I'm going to get the opportunity, if I'm going to get the chance, but I want to get up there one way or the other. And I remember I hopped on, if I remember correct, I think it was the bus. Yeah, it was probably the bus I took up to Boston. But I stayed in a hostel. Like there was a hostel that was um true story. There was a hostel that was near Fenway. It's actually walking distance from Fenway.
Wow.
Like about a block or two from Heinz Convention Center. And I
Wow.
stayed there like just for that audition. And I was like, listen, I want that opportunity. I want this. Let's go. I ended up
Yep.
hopping on the red line to go down to the station the next day, did the audition. Unfortunately, at that time, I didn't get it. It wasn't for me. I mean, it is what it is. But just the hunger and just taking full advantage of opportunities that comes
Hmm.
your way. And so like that story definitely reminded me of that particular memory from a number of years ago.
Yeah, it's a fickle industry because listen, bro, I remember my last show at NBC Sports Washington.
Mhm.
It was Wizards Knicks. It was in March of 2020.
Wow.
And after the game, we did a post game show like we always do. And I remember COVID was just like kind of starting, but no one really knew anything. And then I
Yeah.
went home later that night. Rudy Gobert touched all the microphones. I don't know if you remember
Mhm.
that or
Oh, I
not. And
do very much so.
and just like I just remember, I just had a gut feeling. I just said to my wife, I was like, "This isn't good," you know. And I told her, I said, if sports shut down, uh, we're in a world of trouble here because I mean, sports were the one thing that was always like never shut down. Like we've had so
Constant.
many
Mhm.
tragedies as a
Yeah.
nation, and sports oftentimes brings us together. Um, so
True.
I just remember feeling that threat of like I could just see this. I could see this going bad, and
Hmm.
sure enough, it did. And sports shut down, and they made some hard decisions and they let a lot of people go. So I guess my point is, life just comes at you fast. Obviously during a global pandemic, no one was really hiring at that time. I have a ton of behind the scenes experience. So I was leaning on that, man. I was working at production houses and working on lighting and audio and just really sharpening my behind the scenes skills. But I was working, and then radio, Team 980. Just to show you how blessed I am, man. It was like divine timing, and they offered me my own show Monday through Friday,
Wow.
and that helped, really helped get me here because obviously
Yeah.
NESN heard clips of that show and knew what I was capable of, and it got me the audition.
That's really incredible, and like it's about just being prepared for that
Yep.
opportunity. And after we're done with this recording, there is something I would definitely want to touch base with you on.
Okay.
And the last question I'll ask you is this to wrap it up. And you think about the industry, and you think about like the way that the Boston sports media landscape is in terms of how competitive it is, because it is
Yep.
fiercely competitive. And you talk about the landscape and how like the sports media landscape is shifting. It's shifting
Yep.
and it's changing and it's evolving. I would even
Yep.
say by the year.
Oh yeah.
Um, in terms of how, in more ways than one, we're seeing a rise of streaming opportunities and just streaming in general. And think a lot more content is being consumed, whether if it's through digital or through streaming.
Yep.
Do you foresee a case where like, not I don't think it's just only limited to just solely Boston, but do you see an instance or a case where the sports media landscape really takes off in terms of like the digital aspect, in terms of the way content is being consumed? Because I'm thinking back to over the weekend where the Dolphins and Chiefs game was exclusively on Peacock, and it's a streaming
That's right.
service that's broadcasted via NBC Universal. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, listen. I think I even have a more macro vision of it, where
Hmm.
I just think everything's going to be and already is in a lot of ways ubiquitous.
Hmm.
I think what's happening is everyone's compartmentalizing, and it's like podcast here, radio here, TV here, cable TV, streaming here,
Yep.
network TV. It's too siloed. What I think is going to happen eventually, and it already really has happened, I just think it hasn't been fully embraced, is
Mm.
ultimately we're all in the same house party, and you're just going in different rooms of the house. I mean, I
Wow.
go back to radio.
Hmm.
How I told you radio was like always there for me. I was always getting opportunities to do it. And now I
Right.
realize why. I didn't when I was younger, but you know, to do what you do right now and to do what I do, to go on air and talk to yourself. I mean, obviously you're interviewing me, but you're driving the
Yeah.
show. People that can do that don't grow on trees. And so
Mm.
I can remember way back in the day, people telling me, don't give up on TV though, because radio, it won't even be here in a couple years. Radio's dying. Radio's dying. Radio, that was years ago, bro. Radio's still
Still
radio,
thriving. Hmm.
right? Podcast or podcast. Like I said, content's content. So when I say ubiquitous, I mean, I think the people that can make content and create content and put it on all of these platforms,
Right.
from Facebook to YouTube to podcast to audio to visual to Twitch to whatever it is, you're going to survive. And that's really what I think it is. I just
Mhm.
think everybody's fighting their own battle, trying to, get their piece of the pie. But even streaming now, remember when streaming first started,
Oh
there were
yeah.
there were no commercials. It was like an alternative. You felt like a rebel. Like, oh, this is against the man, right? And now,
Right.
like you just brought up that playoff game on streaming, there were more commercials on that than when you watch it on NBC proper.
Yeah.
So I just think at the end of the day, um, content is king. and there's always going to be a lot of different avenues to consume it. And that's what I try to focus on. It's just creating the best content that I can.
Absolutely. Travis Thomas of NESN and WEEI here on the Hub of Champions podcast on Believe Network. It has been an absolute thrill and an honor to have you on the pod, man. Like, again, thank you so much for what really has been such a tremendous episode from beginning to end. And I really thoroughly enjoyed our conversations, both sports and as well as non-sports alike. And thank you for your time, man.
Of course, man, when you come back up here, even just to visit, until you come back up here permanently, make sure
Yeah,
you hit me up, man, so we
I
can link.
will.
We can get some wings.
Absolutely. I definitely will. Thank you, my man.
All right, brother. Appreciate you, man.